The purpose of today's meeting is actually to provide food for thought and input to the negotiators in processes, as well as about how to mobilize additional funding for international cooperation and effectively use them.
We start our report with a quote from Ban Ki-moon that 2015 is the most important year for development since the founding of the United Nations itself.
What we have seen from research is, and that's important for the future agenda, that if countries graduate from one economic status to the other, then domestic public resources, so tax revenues, etc., are becoming much more important. For domestic purposes, you need very good regulatory frameworks so as to make best use and most effective use of those domestic revenues. Good regulatory framework leads to more private sector investment as well in the countries concerned, and ODA can help actually to catalyze those funds.
But there is a caveat in that capacity development is probably one of the most important things. It is also one of the most difficult things to do, because since Paris we have acknowledged that capacity development is key, and we've been terrible at it.
I think it should focus very clearly on development in terms of contribution to poverty eradication in the poorest countries. And that includes things like social security and food and so on and so forth. And let's have other sources of money and other flows for other purposes, like climate change or migration or what have you.
The minute you use public money to support private flows, you're engaging in market distortion. I mean, we shouldn't fool ourselves here one way or another. So either we're in the business of market distortion, in which way we need to help governments distort markets to meet their own development objectives, or we're in the business of supporting our own industries in order to support our own businesses in terms of how they engage in partner countries. But we should be honest about this.
But I would be on the side of those who say that ODA can help reduce risk for private investors and can help enable entrepreneurship, whether it's small companies, whether it's foreign investors. And I would say there's a moral hazard in not trying this.
This is of crucial importance because the Sustainable Development Goals that countries around the world will agree on this year will need substantial financing. We think the Netherlands can play a crucial role in this process, including by ensuring that donors reaffirm the 0.7 and to ensure that the increases in financing through the private sector will be used for achieving Sustainable Development Goals. And thirdly, to basically work on more systemic change and to ensure there's a shift of power from donors and rich countries to poor country governments as well as citizens.
In the end, but you need to get back to the international commitments on ODA.
I mean, I was asked yesterday by a journalist how I felt about the fact that the Council conclusions didn't have a timeline. And I said, well, there was a timeline, it was 2015. And for 35 years, the Netherlands was on top of that until 2 years ago, just before you were supposed to hit the goal, you said we're going to drop it. And I thought that was a real shame. That kind of showed that these countries are not serious.
That actually you needed to not just focus on the sort of the health needs and the education needs, etc., but also what are the things that really make development move. So the productive capacity, the economic side.
The Dutch public hold a somewhat narrow view on development. They think that ODA should be mainly spent on creating basic provisions for the very poorest in the world. So themes like education, health, clean water are top priority according to the Dutch. And transnational themes like migration, climate change are much lower down the priority list. In order to engage the Dutch public by the international conferences and the new agenda, the Dutch politicians could introduce a new narrative on development, including the new transnational goals, so that the Dutch become aware that development is more than only caring about the basic needs, such as education and health.
It's very important that there is a new narrative on this discussion, and not only the Dutch government is responsible for that, but also others contributing to the debate. So just to repeat that, a focus on global issues, a focus on policy coherence, and a focus on ODA solidarity mechanisms for the least developed countries.